evening, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Apologies, we were a few minutes late as we were dealing with some technical difficulties. Just a note that we are recording this, so please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page, as that is where we house all of our content. My name is Sanafik Gabru. I am YEP's Executive Director and Board Secretary. Hopefully, everybody that is tuning in right now or everybody that's watching this later on YouTube is familiar with YEP. But if not, we are your Ethiopian professionals, but we go by our favorite acronym, YEP. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, but really aiming to be a global platform or a global connection point through platforms like this for our members as individuals so that they can thrive personally and professionally and the community as a whole. I will say just a few more things and then disappear off your screens, but this is a session that is organized by our Diaspora Engagement Program, which houses our YEP Legal Series, which is really an effort on YEP's end to take complex legal matters and dissect it in a way that is digestible and actionable by experts both from within and outside of our community. So today we are very, very excited to have Hellina Hailu with us today. So want to start off by thanking her for being so gracious with her time. Hellina is not new to YEP and has had a wide variety of legal experience in both the corporate or public and private law practices. And during her almost 10-year tenure, she's worked in immigration law, criminal defense, and family law, and also previously worked as a public defender. Today's session is going to be a presentation style where she will discuss various business entities, partnership agreements, and contract basics. So before I hand it over to her, I want to put out 3 disclaimers to keep in mind when posting your comments. First, YEP is a nonprofit, non-religious, non-political organization. So we ask that you keep that in mind when you post any comment that we're going to be sharing publicly. The second is that every panelist that comes to YEP's platform comes as an individual to provide their expertise and not necessarily representing any entity that they may be a part of, both personally and professionally. And finally, I'm sure this is a disclaimer that Hellina will reiterate as well, but this is a general educational seminar and general questions are welcomed and encouraged, but this will not be a platform where you pose individual questions. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Hellina.
Thank you so much, Sanafak. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys. I am happy to be here once again with YEP and to be participating and to share some of my knowledge to our community. I'm always dedicated and committed to trying to lend, what my assistance whenever I can. So I'm very happy to be here today. Um, I do have a presentation today for you all. We'll be talking about business lessons, um, giving some real life examples. It will be an overview of general information for all of you, but also the questions will be the questions that you can ask. You can feel free to ask questions, but just remember that they are general questions. You may not want to post your personal matters or legal matters that you may have pending on here, as it is a public forum. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. I will share the presentation with you all. Give me one moment. Okay, can everybody see that?
Not yet.
Okay. How about now?
I see your downloads page, but not the presentation.
Okay, it should be coming up in a moment. Not now?
No, not yet.
Okay. Hold on. Let's try one more time. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay. Bear with me one moment. My apologies. But as we're working through that, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what we will be talking about, the general agenda, which ultimately is going to be about the different types of corporations, the different types of entities that you can form, because it's very important when you are forming a business or when you're running a business that you shield yourself from the things that could essentially go wrong. You are because a business is like an individual or like a person is how I like to say it. It has its own social security number, similar to have how you may have your own social security number, which is in the business world, that is the EIN, which is how you will be representing or being represented as a business. And so I think I got this now. Can you see it now? Samantha, are you able to see it?
Yes, I can see it. I was on mute.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, great. All right. So, this is lessons for small businesses. Sorry about the technical difficulties, everybody. We shouldn't have any more moving forward. Um, so my name is Hellina Hailu. I'm an attorney licensed to practice in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and North Carolina. I have am the owner and managing attorney of Hailu Legal PLLC. I also am currently doing some government work, so we've limited the practice to areas in business, personal injury, and some DC real estate matters. So, quick disclaimer, as Tanafik said, this information is presentation only. It's not considered to be legal advice for your specific situation. You should always seek out legal counsel for your specific circumstances. The information provided here is for general and educational purposes only. Completing this training or this workshop is not establish an attorney-client relationship with the presenter, which is me, Hellina Hailu. And all information here is for educational purposes, and viewers or attendees in other jurisdictions, so outside of DC, Maryland, and North Carolina, should specifically check with attorneys and the laws in their local areas, as this is general and educational purposes only. So, what would be a legal presentation without a disclaimer anyway, right? So, our agenda is going to be about business structures. We're going to do a quick overview. We won't get too technical with it, but just so that you have a general understanding, whether you're currently a business owner or if you are, getting ready to establish a business. Um, Partnership and operating agreements. What should you have in writing? How should you move forward with it? We'll also talk about business leases and contracts, considering doing business as, which is using a trade name or something to function your business. How would you finance your business? I'll also address issues regarding addresses, registered agent, corporate veil, and then we'll do a quick summary at the very end with a hypothetical using information that I've gathered over the years and experiences that I've seen happen to help you better understand. If at any time during the presentation you have questions, please feel free. I want this to be interactive, but I know also the platform of utilizing a virtual environment can be different. So you can go ahead and drop it in the chat box. We can take a moment and answer questions as needed. So, what are the different types of business entities? Sole proprietorship, which is where it's not registered with the state. You're not required to fill out any official documentation. You just decide you want to start a business, and the next day you go out. Maybe you rent a space. Maybe if you're a barber or a hairdresser, well, those are things that require state licenses. But if you're a babysitter, you don't incorporate your business with the state. It doesn't require registration, but the owner takes on a high risk of business liability. The owner directly, there's no corporate veil. I'll keep referring to a corporate veil. The owner becomes completely responsible, and they're using their own social security number, their own information for all business functions. Then there's a limited liability corporation where an owner has a limited liability, which is it exactly what it says. It's exactly what it sounds like. You limit your liability. You are putting up a corporate veil. You are saying that this business entity is separate from me. It is separate from the individual. It is registered with the state with articles of incorporation. There is you get a tax ID number, and it is, but the person who is owning the limited liability company often or corporation often is taxed through their own 1040 through their it's looked at as pass-through income. um, I'm not a tax expert or tax specialist. I will be There are some tax issues that are going to be addressed here, but I strongly recommend for tax issues that you specifically speak with a licensed CPA to clarify those in-depth questions that will likely come up as you move forward in your business. Um, the next type is a partnership. There are two types of partnerships. There's a general partnership and a limited partnership. In a general partnership, both or all, maybe two, three, four people are equally responsible and have equal power within the organization. In a limited partnership, there's usually one person that's directly running things, and the other one is more like a silent partner. So that's what happens there. And then there's corporations. There are different types of corporations. Some of you may have, if you are currently in business, you may have heard of something called an S corp. Oftentimes, small businesses use S corps to essentially the business owner would be able to write themselves a check, like a paycheck salary, using W-2 rather than having pass through income. You would have direct payment to you or to your employees, and then the business itself would write off its expenses separately from you. So you would have two different taxes that you file during that time period. There's also the C corp, B corp, closed corporation, cooperatives. Corporations get more complex because you're dealing with shareholders rather than just business owners or partners. So we're not going to talk too much about that because it does entail substantially more. We'll briefly just talk about operating agreements and bylaws and leave it at that. Then there's the nonprofit organization, like, for example, YEP is a 501c3 entity, and those are nonprofit organizations. So, like churches, organizations similar to YEP, and they are tax exempt and have a lot of benefits that they gain, but they also have to go through a lot in order to maintain that status. A 501c3, there's a lot of paperwork that goes into it. It is through the IRS, paperwork needs to be filled out, and you also have to do reporting on a regular basis in order to maintain that 501c3 status. So I'm also not going to get into great depth with that, but similar to the corporation, they also need operating agreements to show, and bylaws actually, to show exactly how the business is going to be run. I kind of touched very quickly on all of that, but we're going to jump in a little bit further now. So, you may be asking yourself, which one is the right type of business for me? You need to ask yourself questions as in, what are the risks and benefits, the tax implications for you, the type of liability, the type of business you're getting into, the complexity of your business. Will you be having investors or shareholders participating in your business? Consider the local and state laws. And also, you have to consider licensing of your business. So, for example, if you are a barber, there are licensing rules and regulations in order to open a barber shop. If you are a lawyer and you want to start a law firm, you have to be licensed to practice law in order to start that. If you are a daycare, there are, rules and regulations surrounding daycares, and you have to be appropriately licensed. So those are, that's what I mean by considering the licensing of your business. So we're going to use the structure of a limited liability corporation because it gives you kind of an idea of how a business generally should be structured, and also the concept of limiting your liability, which is essentially what partnerships will do, as well as corporations and nonprofits as well. Sole proprietorships, though, you're just running as a business on your own. You don't have that limited liability. And as we go forward, we'll understand a little bit more. A limited liability is a legal structure of organizations that limit the extent of an economic loss to assets invested in the organization and that keeps the personal assets of investors and owners off limits. So, what does that really mean? That means that if your business gets sued for whatever reason, you are not personally liable. They can't come after your personal house, they can't come after your personal car. Um, it acts as its own entity. So that LLC or that incorporation or that partnership becomes liable, and your personal finances will remain unaffected. Um, and I'm sorry, I misspoke. I did not mean to say and partnerships. Partnerships are not necessarily always subject to that same LLC and corporation incorporation protection, unless they have, like, it's a group of people that have incorporated particularly. So that is the primary thing to be incorporated. So how do you become an LLC, or how do you become incorporated? You have to establish articles of organizations, and you need a registered agent. A registered agent is where the individual will be able to have documents received or mailed to in the event of a lawsuit, or in the event of just people need to find out, any company, you can look it up, where to send mail or documents or how to get in contact with the owner. It doesn't have to be the owner. It can be, there are registered agent businesses where their business is to be your registered agent for your particular company. For example, if a business is incorporated in California but operates in Maryland, that business should have a registered agent in California so that they can receive, and so that the public can know where to contact that business in the event of, usually I refer to this as in the event of a lawsuit. And the articles of organization are are the documents that are filed with the state in order to establish the business. So here's a pro tip that I often like to share with my clients or with people that I'm just giving advice to in regards to a business. You you can be the registered agent of your business, right? But it's best practice not to use your home address, okay, for a number of reasons. But one of the ones I often point out is just for safety reasons. You don't want to have your personal address because these are public records, they're public documents. So you want to be conscious of, putting your personal address out there. Additionally, for the purpose of, you're using, and what we're going to continue to talk about, the corporate veil, you want to be able to have a separation between your personal and your business. So that's why I often recommend getting either an office space or a virtual office space or virtual mailbox, which doesn't use a PO box but uses a street address. There are several companies that do that online, or you can use virtual office space, or consider using a registered agent. We talked about business licenses briefly earlier. Depending on the type of business that you have, you may need to get a license in order to operate it. So, restaurants is another good example of that. You need food permits, handling permits. If you have a tobacco store, you need tobacco sales permits. If you have a liquor store, you need a liquor license. And if you have an insurance business where you're selling insurance, that has to be licensed as well. Hair salons, nail salons, barbershops, all these need particular licenses. So it's not enough to simply organize and file your company with the state. You must also ensure that you're getting the proper licenses and following those processes and procedures. Next, important thing as you're preparing to start your company is to prepare an operating agreement and bylaws. Bylaws are often with corporations, and operating agreements are with LLCs or partnerships. Um, the operating agreement outlines it's like a instructions for how to run this business. It will, if there are multiple partners or multiple persons involved, it will say who how decisions will be made. It will establish the financial guidelines, functional decision making, rules of the business. It includes the rules and regulations that each person that is involved or each shareholder for a corporation is going to be, the rules and regulations that they're going to have to follow. Each partner's roles, like some people will be more, one partner may be dealing with the financial aspect and one partner may be dealing with the marketing aspect. Um, and then it will also establish if a board of directors is needed. The bylaws of a corporation often indicate whether board of directors is needed. It will also indicate the voting rights of the shareholders or of the partners. And it essentially serves as a guide for the organization. It is very important to have your operating agreement or bylaws drafted properly to outline all the things that could come up. Because one thing I often see is, if the bylaws or if the operating agreements don't clearly indicate what to do in particular circumstances, this is where conflict may arise between business owners or even with outside entities. So it's very important to make sure that your bylaws and your operating agreement and/or operating agreement are tailored in such a way that you are able to clearly protect yourself. Partnership agreements are specifically in relation to general partners or limited partnerships. It establishes how the expenses are divided. So much like the articles of organization or the bylaws, a partnership is the agreement between you and your partner. Who will do what? Who's responsible for what? We often, or some people go into business with very close friends or with family members. And when you go into business with family members or close friends, oftentimes it's easy to say, well, I trust this person and I don't need to have a partnership agreement. And this is not, partnership agreements are internal documents. They're not filed anywhere, they're not kept anywhere for anybody, but it's a contract between you and that other person. And it outlines every possible thing that could go wrong or that could happen, how you'll resolve conflicts, how much of a share or how much of a percentage each individual is entitled to, and it it basically preemptively resolves conflict, meaning before the conflict happens, you can go back, you and your business partner can go back, take a look at the document and say, oh hey, this is actually much more clear now. Okay, I understand. I misunderstood that. And you can resolve conflict before it happens. So I strongly advise, um, you know, that you take it into consideration. Like I said, I'm not giving legal advice right now, but it's just a pro tip. um, so when forming your LLC, so we're using the example of an LLC here. When you're forming your LLC, you have your articles of incorporation or organization, depending on your jurisdiction. They call it a different name. You determine your registered agent, where you'll have your legal documents sent if your company is sued or where the state knows that they can contact you. You obtain your necessary licenses. And then here's the part I haven't touched on quite yet is you get your EIN or tax identification number or employer identification number, and you get that directly from the IRS website. And then you can establish your business bank account. You Once you have your EIN number and your articles of incorporation or articles of organization, you can go to the bank and open up a business bank account, establish business credit, um, and essentially separate your business funds from your personal funds. That's very important when we continue to talk about this issue of the corporate veil that I'll continue to bring up as we go on. Um, I There are a lot of websites out there that will say they can assist you with getting an EIN or a tax ID number. Tax IDs are free. Go to www.irs.gov, follow the prompts on the website, and you should be able to obtain an EIN number for free. So that's just something that um, if you click on a website, and I say this because if you click on a website that says that you need to pay before they'll give you the EIN number, that is probably not something you should be using. Go to irs.gov and you'll be able to get your EIN number. Now, it's different if you have somebody that you're paying to do services for you in order to help you establish your business. Like if you have an attorney preparing your business and they are charging you to do the work, that's different. They're charging for their service, not for the EIN number. But I just want to clarify that EIN numbers should be obtained from irs.gov, especially if you're going about this on your own. Don't get tricked into scam websites. Um, and then you also want to determine your business name. You want to make it easy for people to remember. You should do an online search, check registered names with the Secretary of State or other business registration agency in your jurisdiction and determine if the business, if that business name already exists or is it trademarked. You don't want to name your business after another person's business or something that's trademarked and open yourself up for the possibility of getting sued before you even get started. Um, and keep your business spending and your personal spending separate. For to it's best because you keep your receipts separate, you keep your expenses separate. You'll know exactly what you spent on your business, and that helps you with your taxes. Tax time is coming soon, and these are the types of things that it will help you, the CPAs, and also this helps you with protecting the corporate veil. So now I've talked about, I'm not at the corporate veil slide yet. Okay, so then when you're selecting a business name, um, sorry, I already touched on this. Once you have your business name, your tax ID, your articles of organizations, then you're going to determine what your business name is. And sometimes the business name may seem much longer, right? For example, Google is Alphabet Inc. It's not Google. That's so you have a DBA, which is a doing business as. It's a way of doing business under a different name. You'll have an incorporation, and then you'll have maybe a trade name or a name of a particular business to be easier to describe or to be catchy or something of that sort. That's why some businesses use DBAs. Another example is a sole proprietorship. Since they're not incorporated and they don't have a formal name, they may not want to use their personal name as the name of the business or the type of business that they're running. So they'll use a DBA, a doing business as. And in those situations, the doing business as, when you do have that, you register it with your state because the state needs to know what businesses are being run by whom. And this is again in the event of a lawsuit or in the event of they need to contact you if there's an issue or if there's something people need to contact you for. That's why we register DBAs as well. So, even if you're a sole proprietorship, if you have some type of trade name that you're using, you need to register that with the state. Okay, so I've talked about this thing called a corporate veil. It is not, an actual veil that you wear on your head, but it is a term of art that is used to describe what separates the owner from the company and maintains or loses, and describes whether a company will maintain or lose their limited liability protections. So as you see in this image, you have personal assets and then you have the corporate veil blocking that person's personal assets from lawsuits and liabilities. The main thing and why it's always described as you should have a separate business name, separate business entity, why you even get a tax ID number, all of those reasons is because you don't want to get that corporate veil pierced, which means if it's pierced, they can come after your personal assets. So here in this image, you see Clark sues an organization that organization ends up having no money. Maybe the business is out of business or doesn't have sufficient money to cover the expenses. The court determines that uh, the organization is responsible, and then they are able to go after Joe's assets because the corporate veil may have been pierced. And so how does that get pierced? It's the person doesn't have a separate business account. They use their personal expenses and their business expenses out of the same account. They use business expenses accounts to cover their personal expenses. The business is undercapitalized. There are no filings or tax filings or uh, trade names filed. Essentially, it's just used as the person is using it as a disguise. And so um, then the court is who would determine, the judge would determine in litigation whether the corporate veil is going to be pierced or not. And because Joe didn't in this example, because Joe didn't establish sufficient documentation to show that his business is in fact separate from him, then in that situation, they can come after him directly. Are there any questions so far? I'll just take a quick second. Okay. Okay. So we'll continue. Establishing a presence. It's important to get your name, what you've now established your company, you've done all the things that you need to do from the state side. You have your DBA registered, you have, meeting minutes, notes, you've separated your accounts. So now you may need a logo. You might need to establish a website, secure your domain name by purchasing that domain name in advance. Even if you're not ready to set up your website, you would want to protect that domain name that matches your DBA or your corporate or your LLC's name or corporate name. You would want to get a phone number for your business. This helps to establish separateness, right? Like you have a separate phone number. You can get an email address that matches your domain name, and establish a social media presence. So these are ways that you can start to show the business has its completely own identity. Again, maintaining that corporate veil and that protection. So now that the business is established, you may have employees, and this could be a whole conversation in and of itself, a whole training in and of itself, but or seminar rather. But I just want to briefly talk about employees versus independent contractors. A lot of people work as independent contractors, so you may be familiar. When you are an independent contractor, you have autonomy. You are running your own business. You're just doing particular tasks on a specialized way for the business within your specialized skills, often paid in a lump sum without taxes being taken out first. They don't have a uniform, they don't have a name tag, and the expenses that are being paid to an independent contractor are completely deductible as a business expense without limit, as long as it's ordinary and necessary work. And again, that's subject to tax laws, but those are deductible from the business's expenses. So, as a business owner, you may want to consider what type of work you're doing, and maybe independent contractors are beneficial to your company. Whatever you pay them becomes fully deductible. However, there's also an argument to be made for having employees as W-2 employees. Becomes more of a permanent relationship. They have to follow the rules and regulations of the employer. They have more of a fixed schedule and scope of work according to the employer's instructions. Taxes are cut from their payment. They wear uniforms. They're potentially, depending on the type of work, but often wearing uniforms. It identifies that they are part of that organization, that they are under the umbrella or under the control of the employer, and they're paid by salary, which is deductible up to a certain amount, again, subject to tax laws. We won't get too far into that. But understanding the concept between independent contractor and employees is also important as you consider the structure of your business. And part of the reason I talk about that is because of something called workers' compensation. Independent contractors are not entitled to workers' compensation. If you're an independent contractor and you are injured on the job or while doing the task that you have been hired or contracted rather, not hired, but contracted to do, you're not entitled to workers' compensation unless you can show that the employer has you working as an employee, right? That the independent contractor, that the relationship is more of an employer employee rather than independent contractor relationship. So again, this can get complex. We're doing a general overview, so I'll stop there when I'm describing the issues or the fact pattern that would uh, determine whether somebody's an independent contractor or employer. And in the court system, however, because it could be argued, even if you are an independent contractor, there could be arguments made to say that the relationship is actually an employer-employee relationship. But for these purposes, independent contractors are not entitled to workers' comp, and employers having one or more employee, full or part-time, are generally required to have that benefit for their employees. If you have employees, you may be required to have workers' compensation. And that is where people are paid out for incidents of unemployment or work-related injuries. Um, and then And so, just a quick pro tip that I threw in here as well is you want to make sure you create a safe work environment. Pay attention to whether your employee is injured on the job, any medical restrictions. So, for example, if somebody has a they've been working for you and then they fall ill, they come back to work and they have a medical restriction, you would want to try to respect that as much as possible, especially if the person's medical restriction is a result of something that happened on the job. So if they pulled a back muscle while lifting a box in your store, and they now have a medical restriction, you need to follow that medical restriction. You can't fire your employee due to an injury that occurred on the job, um, and a medical restriction, especially while a workers' compensation claim is pending. That The consequences are pretty high. Well, yeah. Anyway, that just opens you up to subject to more litigation. And just very briefly on taxes, I recommend, or I want to share information regarding what you could do. Some of the things: track all your payments, make payments to employees or independent contractors using a consistent payroll system structure or some type of formal structure. Avoid paying your employees in cash. That way you can deduct it from your business income. Use the softwares like QuickBooks to manage your business expenses, payroll, and manage assets. You can pay as a business owner. Your taxes are not being deducted each time you a client or customer pays you. You need to pay your taxes quarterly. Track all your expenses, including mileage, supplies, rent payments for your business space, etc. And speak with a tax advisor. And definitely, find out what can be deducted, what cannot be deducted, and keeping organized and accurate documentation for your business expenses will help avoid any future consequences or problems in the future. Another subject matter that comes up with a business is contracts. A contract is a written or spoken agreement. There's an offer, there's an acceptance between two or more persons or two businesses. There's been mutual assent, meaning there's been a meeting of the minds that both people understand what's being discussed. They are of age, meaning adults, or and able to comprehend and understand the terms of the agreement, and it's for adequate consideration. So, someone pays X amount of dollars for this service, and then that's the way that goes. Um, all and another thing to remember is that certain agreements that are verbal are contracts and can be bound and upheld in court. Certain other agreements cannot. That's a very vast and another deep dive. So if you guys have future questions about that, maybe we can go into that further. But ultimately, there are certain types of contracts that have to be in writing and they're not enforceable if they're not in writing, and others that can be enforceable if they are not in writing. my recommendation, pro tip, put everything in writing. It's always easier to just have agreements in writing because then it helps to reduce stress. It will reduce disputes. It will lead to more favorable outcomes for you as the business owner, or likely lead to better outcomes. So we talked about workers' compensation, which is a type of insurance. And then there's other types of insurances that your business may want to consider. There's business liability for injuries that customers may face, especially if your business is a storefront. You may want to have a business liability in case anybody gets injured on your premises. There's umbrella insurance that you could use to overarch multiple different things. If you have um, a car service, you would want to you need to consider business car insurance. There's hazard, fire. Consider what types of insurance your business might need. Um, a lot of service providers need to have type of liability insurance, um, especially like uh, hair salons, barbershops, um, even I believe accountants, lawyers, doctors, pharmacists, they all have different types of liability insurance per their trade. So make sure you take a look into that. It's always better to have insurance than to not, especially if you have a high risk business. And then any questions about anything? Okay. We'll keep going. So now your business is established. You have contracts in place for your customers, and now you decide you need an office space or you need a storefront. Well, business leases or commercial leases are much longer than residential agreements, right? They're not often for 1 year. They're usually looking at 5 years, 10 years, and some commercial leases may require that you pay a portion of your gross income towards the rent, essentially a split with the landlord. So that's one way that they structure the lease agreements. Um, and again, for your business lease, you should also get a separate liability insurance for your business space or premises, particularly if your business space is one that customers or clients frequent in person in cases where because if there's an injury on the premises, your business could be held liable. Um, when negotiating a business lease, you want to take into consideration, whether they're providing utilities, are they providing you internet? Is there any furniture involved in the business lease? Are there trade fixtures that are coming with the business space? Are you getting depending on what type of business you have, you need to make sure that all of the terms are fitting the type of business that you have before you sign it. Because once you sign, this is a long-term lease and for a substantial amount of money. So you want to make sure you take time to review that. And if you are having difficulty understanding that lease, you would want to get an attorney to take a look at it for you as well, and possibly negotiate terms that would be more in your favor. Now, a lot of business owners have multiple business. When owning multiple businesses, it's probably best. This is a pro tip. It's probably best to incorporate each business separately because otherwise, in the event of a lawsuit or if there are debts from one business and the other business could potentially be held liable for the debts that are owed. Having separate limited liability companies under a parent company is going to help protect each business entity as an individual. Simply having different DBAs could make one business liable for the other, but different entities protects all assets for each business. So for example, if you take a look at this image, um, you have one LLC and then they have multiple businesses and uh, DBAs, meaning trade names that they've registered, but all of them are owned under the same LLC. This opens up that one LLC to consequences from the other. Um, and so then quickly want to touch on financing. We're not going to go too much into this, but you have local banks, investors, possible shareholders that would be investing into the business. And then also there's the Small Business Administration, which has a ton of information on starting up a business. They have guides, they have a lot of examples and a lot of financing options available there as well. So you can go to sba.gov, is a great resource to take a look at as you're preparing to establish your business. So now we're going to bring it all together in a little bit of a scenario. This is a hypothetical scenario. This is not a real person, but just taking 10 years of legal experience and information together. And to try to touch on this, I made up this hypothetical that hopefully will be beneficial to you all. So Sarah owns a business, Sarah Dreams Big LLC. Under her LLC, she has one business, DBA Sarah's Injera, another DBA Sarah's Dresses, and a third, Sarah's Limos. All businesses are under Sarah Dreams Big LLC. Sarah's Injera is a highly profitable business because Sarah makes her injera for less than her competitors and markets really well. Sarah's Dresses is doing okay, but two people don't like her dresses that much. Sarah's Limos does well, but she has trouble remembering to maintain her business's car insurance. On March 1, 2023, Sarah was notified that her insurance had lapsed. She didn't pay attention to the letter and instructed her employee to continue taking customers, believing that nothing would happen because for 10 years her employee had been accident free. On March 2nd, okay, that's a typographical error. I apologize. On March 2nd, 2023, so the next day, her employee, who she instructed to continue taking customers, was driving a limo for Sarah's Limos and unfortunately was in an accident. And was involved in a car accident. And the driver, an employee of Sarah's, who she instructed, even though she knew her insurance had lapsed in coverage, is found to be liable for the accident. The person that got hit has a lot of injuries and later sues Sarah's Limos. Sarah's employee is also injured. What is likely to happen? If anybody wants to chime in or take a second to kind of think about it based on everything we've discussed, we can kind of know what may or may not happen in this case. Okay, so here are some of the possible outcomes. Sarah's businesses are all under one LLC. Therefore, her entire company, to include her company that is doing really well, Sarah's Injera, could be responsible to pay the debts that are owed to the injured, non-liable person. Sarah could lose her successful Injera business. Sarah Dreams Big LLC will be responsible to cover expenses and debts owed. Sarah Dreams Big LLC didn't renew their liability insurance, and when the accident occurred, she was uninsured, and that means that the injured driver can sue Sarah Dreams Big LLC directly. There's not even an insurance policy to protect her business in this scenario. I thought of all the worst possible outcomes in this case. Sarah instructed her employee to drive. Her employee, remember. So she provided that instruction. We talked about independent contractors and employees earlier. So her employee is under her direct instruction. She knew that the liability insurance had lapsed, and therefore she is responsible for her employee's injuries too. And her employee is likely entitled to workers' compensation. And if Sarah doesn't have workers' compensation insurance, her employee could sue her for all of the employee's lost wages and medical bills. Um, Personal injury is not included in that because workers' comp, oftentimes in most jurisdictions, does not include personal injury. So pain and suffering. Sarah will also be responsible to cover the cost of the injured party's medical expenses, pain and suffering, lost wages, and property damages. If Sarah's Limos doesn't have enough money to cover the expenses, profits from Sarah's Injera and Sarah's Dresses could be used to pay for the injuries and damage from the accident, causing her to lose a substantial amount of profit and possibly lose all three businesses because they weren't set up separately. But If Sarah had three separate LLCs, Sarah's Injera LLC, Sarah's Dresses LLC, and Sarah's Limos LLC, instead of just having them as DBAs under Sarah Dreams Big LLC, the following things could be different. When suing Sarah, the only profits or money that the injured party or the injured employee could sue for would be for money associated with Sarah's Limos LLC only, because it would be under the corporate veil. Sarah's other businesses would remain unaffected. So her very profitable Injera business would remain unaffected, and she would be able to protect each entity separately. Um, However, there's the corporate veil. What if it's lifted? So you see in this cartoon, there's the judges are the ones to lift the corporate veil. If Sarah commingled funds, if she used her businesses as an extension of herself, meaning she used her companies as a veil, but really was using all of the money to fund her lavish personal lifestyle, didn't maintain personal business accounts, separate personal and business accounts, and negligently mixed money from each business, didn't keep proper accounting, that she engaged or possibly engaged in some fraudulent activity, then even if those businesses are separate LLCs, the corporate veil could be pierced, and the court could order that she pay the injured party from her own pocket or using funds from all of the other businesses or all of the other companies because their assets were all commingled and used for fraudulent or personal purposes. So it's not just having the LLCs, you need to follow those rules of keeping things separate. Now, what if Sarah had a sole proprietorship? If she was just the solo owner, she never incorporated her business, maybe she had the DBAs, and she just ran it as a sole proprietorship because she didn't want to have to deal with the process and procedures of filing a corporate entity. She just felt like it was too much, and she knew that she was talented and that she could be highly successful. Well, when the accident happened, the injured party would sue her directly. They would come after her house, they would come after her personal funds. She's she's the employer of the driver and is held responsible for the actions of her employee as long as the employee was not acting outside of the scope of employment. So whenever an employee is acting within the scope of employment, the employer is responsible for the employee's actions as long as they were not um, grossly negligent in their behavior. The injured party could sue her and come after her for her personal financial assets and after her multiple successful businesses because none of them were incorporated, and she could potentially be held personally liable, meaning she could lose everything, and that would just be terrible. So these are the reasons, you want to go ahead and protect yourself. You want to protect your business. You work hard for your business. You work hard to establish this organization. If you use your talents, you do great services, but because you missed a step, you could potentially lose everything. Um, if it will only take a few hours and a couple $100s to make sure to protect yourself. While there are no guarantees of outcomes and business is always a risky thing to take on, you want to protect your personal assets separate from your business as much as possible. You also want to keep your customers and your employees safe and protected by maintaining liability insurance, following up with all of the licensing regulations, following up with bills that are due, knowing when, before insurance lapses, checking off all of those things, because sometimes it's a matter of just one day, and it could, things could go completely haywire. Don't let a simple judgment lapse ruin everything you worked hard for. Um, and so before we close, I just wanted to point out a couple of important websites for registering a business in the District of Columbia. I'm just going to speak about the states that I'm licensed in. District of Columbia, Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection, you can go to corponline.dcra.dc.gov. And then for registering a business in Maryland, you would go to businessexpress.maryland.gov to get an EIN. You would go to irs.gov, and I left off North Carolina, but in North Carolina, you go to directly to the Secretary of State's website and you'd be able to register your business there. They now have online registration as well. And I believe in in Virginia, I'm not licensed there, but you can also check with the Secretary of State. For each state, basically, check with the Secretary of State for that website. And any questions, and then just, you can, if you need to email me or have other, would like to chat outside of this, you can reach me at helena@hailulegal.com. My website is hailulegal.com. And yeah, so any questions? I think I'll stop sharing now so that I can see the chat as well.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm monitoring the chat as well. I know we had someone who guessed it would affect all DBAs for Sarah Dreams Big LLC. There's another one that says VASCC, so I'm not sure if that was a question. So if that individual wants to clarify in the comments, feel free to do so in the next minute.
Oh, it sounds like maybe the Virginia, where to register a business in Virginia. Is that what they were?
Maybe this is the
Maybe, I don't know.
This is the comment.
Okay. Oh. Not sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I hope that was all very helpful. Tried to bring it all together for you guys so that you can, get a picture. Like sometimes all of this stuff becomes so abstract. And of course, we can't, within an hour, there's no way we could get through everything that could possibly come up with a business. But there's so many different things. And, people that are starting out with a new business, I just wish you all the best of luck. I recommend you get a good team to help you to establish that, especially if it's a more complex or complicated business. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Hellina.
No problem.
Individual clarified that was for registering Virginia business. So thank you for sharing that resource. And also wanted to show a comment from Zion, thanking you for sharing your knowledge and that this was very helpful and informative.
You're welcome.
I think we have one more question that I'll share. I think I'll let you address that, Alina.
This is for the United States. Unfortunately, I do not cannot comment on how Ethiopian business structures are, but just from a general standpoint, I think some of these tidbits could be potentially useful. In terms of how you register your business with the particular state and establishing those corporate things and issues of liability are particular more so towards the United States and the jurisdictions that I addressed, as I'm licensed in Maryland, DC, and North Carolina. But we, I think from a general practice or a general standpoint, I would say having things in writing never hurt anybody. And I think that could go across global. So writing down your partnership agreements, writing down who's responsible for what, that could be a great. I think that could translate internationally. Yes.
Great. I don't see any more questions, so I think it makes sense for us to wrap up now. Thank you again, Hellina, for such an informative session. Again, we are your Ethiopian professionals, most commonly known as YEP, and the YEP Legal Series is really a resource for everybody here to understand complex legal topics. So if there's a specific topic that you would like us to dissect on our next session, please comment in the chat or reach out to us on our various social media platforms. Actually, Hellina, if you have time, I think we got one more question.
Sure.
I'll just show it here.
Okay, so what is the legal procedures to establish an association for businesses in same services to deal with brokers. Um, um, I'm I'm guessing, are you saying brokers? Um, I don't know which brokers. Are you talking about real estate brokers? Are you talking about business brokers? Or maybe when there's a business for sale, sale? Um, I think this is a very particular question, likely. So we can, if you would like to reach out to me via email, I'm happy to try to get I think I have several follow-up questions to that question. So it's probably getting to this person's personal specificity. So we can definitely address that separately.
Agreed. Well, we will go ahead and close the session. Thank you again for everybody that tuned in. Hope you all have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you all. Take care.